They walked away. Good. That wasn't abandonment, that was alignment. Because sometimes freedom doesn't come wrapped in comfort, it comes disguised as rejection. And when they left, they didn't take your worth with them. They just made room for you to finally rise without limits. You ever notice how the most painful goodbyes are the ones that end up saving you? At first, rejection feels like failure. It stings. It knocks the wind out of you. Whether it's someone walking away, an opportunity slipping through your fingers, or a door slammed shut in your face, your mind instantly goes to the worst places. What did I do wrong? Why wasn't I enough? How could they just leave? You run those thoughts on repeat until they carve doubt into your confidence. But here is what I want you to understand. Rejection is not the end. It's the reroute. It's not destruction, it's divine direction. And when you start seeing it that way, everything changes. You weren't meant to fit in every room. You weren't meant to be chosen by everyone. You weren't meant to hold on to people who were only passing through. Sometimes they walked away because they couldn't walk with you to where you're going. They didn't break you. They freed you. That pain, that sting of loss, it's pressure. And pressure builds strength. Pressure builds diamonds. Rejection, when viewed correctly, is actually preparation. It's a test, not of your worth, but of your willingness to rise when it feels like everything around you is falling apart. You see, we often chase comfort, familiarity, and validation, but growth doesn't live there. Growth lives on the other side of pain, of challenge, of loss. It lives in the space where you were forced to look at yourself, without the distractions, without the applause, without the crowd. Rejection strips you down. It peels away the ego, the illusions, the noise. It forces you to confront what's real and what's not, and what's left is truth. Raw truth. The kind of truth that builds you, not breaks you. I know what it feels like to be overlooked, to be left behind, to be told you're not the one. But I also know that's not where the story ends. That's where it begins. The moment someone says, rejection lights a fire, if you let it. It puts you on a path with no crowd, no cheers, no shortcuts. Just you, your grit, and your vision. And in that silence, you start to build something they couldn't see, something even you couldn't see until they walked away. It's easy to think that what we lost was the best thing that could have happened, but that's only because we hadn't yet met what was truly meant for us. That relationship ending, it made room for self-worth. That opportunity falling through, it forced you to create your own. That friend leaving, it made space for alignment, not attachment. When people reject you, don't chase, don't beg, don't fold. Stand up straighter, because what left wasn't your future. It was a lesson, and here's the truth a lot of people won't tell you. You don't rise when everything is going right. You rise when everything seems to be falling apart, and you still show up. You rise in the moments when no one believes in you, but you do. You rise when you turn your heartbreak into hunger. That's when the shift happens. That's when the broken pieces start forming a foundation, not a prison. So many people give up at rejection. They let one no define their worth, one exit define their story. But I'll tell you right now, the greatest transformations I've seen came after the deepest disappointments. The world doesn't give breakthroughs to the comfortable, it gives them to the relentless, to the ones who don't just survive the rejection, they use it. You don't need closure when you have clarity, and clarity comes when you realize that rejection is just redirection in disguise. You weren't denied, you were redirected, towards something greater, stronger, more aligned. So stop treating it like a punishment. Start treating it like a push. Because that's exactly what it is. They left? Good. That space was needed. That pain, fuel. That silence, a signal. Now it's just you, raw, unfiltered, ready. And when you're ready, the world can't ignore what's next. Let them walk. Let the doors close. Let the chapter end, because you weren't meant to stay small just to stay accepted. You were meant to rise, and rejection was the first step. That empty feeling you're carrying. The one that hits you in the silence, in the stillness, in the quiet moments, when everyone's gone and everything's over. That feeling doesn't mean you're broken. It doesn't mean you've lost. It doesn't mean your story is done. It means the page has turned. And now you're staring at the blank one. Most people run from emptiness. They avoid it. They fill it with noise, distractions, people, validation, anything that numbs the silence. But that emptiness, that's where the real work begins. It's not a void, it's a blank canvas. It's, what will I create from here? Because that space, the one you think is full of nothing, is actually full of possibility. Possibility that never could have existed if they hadn't walked away, if the job hadn't ended, if the relationship hadn't crumbled. That space is what you've been given to rebuild yourself from scratch, on your terms this time. No more chasing, no more shrinking, no more settling for halfway. See, we often look at loss as subtraction. We think something was taken from us, someone, some dream, some plan. But sometimes life subtracts in order to clear the space for something bigger, something real, something you weren't even capable of imagining yet. The emptiness isn't a punishment, it's preparation. It's the pause before the rewrite. It's the inhale before the next powerful exhale. And what you do in that silence, when no one is watching, when no one is clapping, when no one is there to tell you you've got this, that's what defines who you really are. Because when the distractions are gone, when the attachments have been severed, when you're no longer performing for someone else's approval, that's when you finally get to meet the person underneath it all. You. You see, most people never get that opportunity. They keep themselves so busy chasing, so tangled in expectation, they never actually stop long enough to ask, what do I want? Not what others expect, not what makes everyone else comfortable. What you want, deeply, truly, fully. And that answer doesn't come when you're surrounded by noise. It comes in the quiet. It comes in the empty room. It comes when life strips you down and says, now show me who you really are. You get to choose now. That's the gift. That emptiness is a reset button in disguise. You're no longer reacting to life. You're shaping it. Word by word, step by step, choice by choice. You don't have to be who you were. You don't have to carry. You are free to create, not rebuild what broke. Create what's never been seen before. And you don't need a map when you're writing your own story. That's what most people forget. They think the silence is a sign they've been forgotten, that the loss means they've failed. But you haven't failed. You've been invited into your own becoming, invited to build something so rooted in who you are that no one can take it from you this time. Not their departure, not rejection, not doubt, nothing. Will you fill it with distractions again, or will you build something sacred there? Because in that space, there's power, there's clarity, there's vision, there's healing, and most of all, there's truth. The kind of truth that's not influenced by applause or popularity or pressure. The kind of truth that's quiet but immovable. You are not empty, you are open. And that openness means you're no longer bound by what was. You are free to step into what will be. They left? Good, that chapter's done. Now you hold the pen, you get to write the comeback. You get to choose the new standard. The emptiness isn't a loss. It's the birthplace of something that's never been seen before. Your next chapter. It comes in the quiet. It comes in the empty room. It comes when life strips you down and says, "Now show me who you really are." You get to choose now. That's the gift. That emptiness is a reset button in disguise. You're no longer reacting to life. You're shaping it, word by word, step by step, choice by choice. You don't have to be who you were. You are free to create, not rebuild what broke. Create what's never been seen before. And you don't need a map when you're writing your own story. That's what most people forget. They think the silence is a sign they've been forgotten, that the loss means they've failed. But you haven't failed. You've been invited. Invited into your own becoming. Invited to build something so rooted in who you are that no one can take it from you this time. Not their departure, not rejection, not doubt. Nothing. What are you going to do with that empty space? That's the question. Will you or will you build something sacred there? Because in that space, there's power. There's clarity. There's vision. There's healing. And most of all, there's truth. The kind of truth that's not influenced by applause or popularity or pressure. The kind of truth that's quiet but immovable. You are not empty. You are open, and that openness means you're no longer bound by what was. You are free to step into what will be. They left? Good. That chapter's done. Now you hold the pen. You get to write the comeback. You get to choose the new standard. You get to rise. The emptiness isn't a loss. It's the birthplace of something that's never been seen before. Your next chapter. So don't fear the silence. Don't run from the blank page. Pick up the pen and write. When people walk out of your life, when situations fall apart, when everything you've grown used to suddenly disappears, it doesn't feel like liberation. It feels like loneliness. Like something vital was ripped away. And that's the tricky part. Freedom, real freedom, doesn't show up with confetti. It usually arrives quiet, cold, and dressed in the skin of isolation. At first, it feels like abandonment. You start asking questions like, "What did I do wrong?" or "Why did they leave?" But those questions are the echoes of your old life trying to keep a grip on you. They come from the part of you that was comfortable being caged, because at least the cage was familiar. And that's the cruel trick of comfort. Even if it was slowly draining the life out of you, at least you knew the root. At least you had someone there, even if they were never really present. But now it's just you. No noise, no distractions, no one to text when things get tough, no one to validate you when you're feeling unsure. And in that silence, it's tempting to believe that you're alone because you've lost, that the absence of others means the absence of value. But you're not empty, you're just undistracted. What you're feeling isn't punishment, it's the weight of freedom settling in. It's the heaviness of responsibility resting on your shoulders for the first time, without the false comforts to dull it. Because real freedom? It means you're accountable now, fully. And that's not easy. when you're no longer defined by someone else's opinion, when there's no more applause to chase, no more hands to hold you up. You have to decide who you are. You have to look in the mirror day after day and show up for yourself with no witnesses, no safety net, no shortcut. And yeah, it's lonely. But that loneliness is fertile ground. That quiet space where no one else is speaking into your ear, no one else is directing your steps. That's the place where your voice finally becomes audible. It's where your strength starts to form, not because you're trying to prove anything to anyone, but because you finally realize who you're becoming matters more than who you've lost. See, freedom will test you before it empowers you. It strips you of everything shallow to see if you'll build something deeper. It removes the noise to see if you'll find your voice. It takes away the comfort to see if you'll create your own peace. And every single person you admire, every story of transformation and greatness started with that same feeling. Loneliness that turned into alignment, emptiness that turned into purpose, silence that turned into power. Most people don't make it through that phase. They run back to what broke them because it feels better than being alone. They chase new noise, new people, new validation just to fill the void. But every time you do that, you delay your own awakening. You stay in chains that look like comfort. But when you resist that urge, when you sit in the silence and learn from it, something shifts. You stop needing the outside world to tell you who you are. You start building from the inside out. That's when freedom begins to feel different. It stops being heavy. It starts to feel like clarity, like ownership, like peace. And not the kind of peace, the kind you earned. The kind that no one can take from you because you didn't borrow it. You built it. And yes, some nights will still feel lonely. Some mornings will still feel quiet. But that's not a void, it's space. Space you get to fill with something real. Space you get to protect and shape and pour your essence into. That's what freedom really is. It's not the absence of people, it's the presence of self. Not needing anyone to complete you because you've already found your center. So if you're walking through that phase right now, where it feels like the whole world, don't chase, don't numb, stand in it, feel it. Let it break what needs breaking. Let it teach you who you are when no one's watching. Because when freedom first walks through the door, it doesn't feel like celebration. It feels like solitude. But that solitude isn't your enemy, it's your initiation. And when you survive that silence, you don't just find freedom, you become it. When we're surrounded by people, we often mistake their presence for our strength. Their applause becomes our fuel, their opinions become our mirror, and their support becomes our crutch. But here's the truth. The power you're searching for was never in them. It was never in their hands. It's been inside you the whole time, quietly waiting for the noise to stop so it could finally be heard. That's the paradox. As long as you're leaning on others, you'll never fully meet yourself. As long as your self-worth is tied to how others treat you, you're building your identity on sand. People can walk away, applause can fade, attention can shift. But the kind of power that lasts, that changes your future, is built in the silence of isolation. And I get it. Isolation feels brutal. It feels like punishment, like you're being forgotten. You start to question your worth simply because the crowd is gone. But what if the silence isn't abandonment? What if it's an invitation? What if this space, this uncomfortable, lonely space, is the exact environment where your strength can finally take root. We've been conditioned to believe that power looks loud, that it stands on stages, commands attention, gets validated. But real power isn't loud. It's anchored. It doesn't need to shout because it knows who it is. And that kind of power only comes when you've gone to war with your weakness in private, when you've looked your fears in the eye without a cheering section, when you've chosen to show up even when no one's watching. That's where the real work begins, in the dark. Not in front of an audience, but behind closed doors. Not when it's easy, but when it's silent, boring, and painful. Power is built when you keep going after failure, when you train with no spotlight, when you grind through doubt, because that's when you start realizing you are enough. Not because someone said it. The world has confused connection with dependency. Yes, relationships matter. Community matters. But you can't rely on the world to remind you of your strength. You have to carry that inside of you, because there will be days when no one texts back, days when the room is empty, days when you're the only one who believes. And in those moments, your survival won't depend on who stayed. It will depend on what you built when you were alone. Every person who's ever done something meaningful had to walk that path. They had to face solitude, not as a punishment, but as a forge. It burned off what was weak and brought out what was real. And maybe that's where you are right now, staring at the quiet, feeling like you've been left behind. But what if you're not behind? What if you're just being set apart to build something no one else can give you? This is where you stop needing permission. This is where you let go of trying to be understood, accepted, or celebrated. You don't need to prove anything to anyone. You just need to become the person you were meant to be. And that version of you? It's not found in a room full of people. It's found in the silence of your own decisions. When you stop chasing validation and start chasing growth, everything shifts. You start building routines that aren't sexy, but they're solid. You stop wasting energy trying to impress people and start investing that energy in building yourself. You begin to understand that being alone isn't weakness. It's the beginning of... The world may try to convince you that your power is in your followers, your network, your influence. But the power that endures is the one that doesn't need to be seen. It's the power you cultivate when no one else is looking, when it's just you and the truth, when the mirror becomes your coach, your critic, and your compass. So if they left you, good. You've been gifted something priceless. The freedom to find your strength without the noise, the permission to build your own identity, untouched by expectation, the space to become who you were always meant to be, not who they wanted you to be. And that kind of power, it doesn't fade when the room empties. It doesn't die when the applause stops. It's forged in fire, tested in silence, and built to last. Because real power isn't given, it's earned in the shadows. We spend so much time trying to explain ourselves, trying to make people see our vision, understand our path, validate our decisions. But here's the truth nobody really tells you. You're not meant to be understood by everyone. And more than that, you don't need to be. You weren't put here to fit inside the lines of someone else's expectations. You weren't born to be digestible, to make everyone comfortable. If you have a calling inside you, if you're building something bigger than yourself, if you're walking a path that requires you to break away from the crowd, then by definition, you're going to be misunderstood. And that's not a failure. That's not a flaw. That's the price of authenticity. See, people will only ever understand you through the lens of their own limitations, their own fears, their own experiences. When you start doing something different, when you rise, when you evolve, when you choose purpose over popularity, you challenge the version of you they were comfortable with. And not everyone is ready to meet the new version. Not everyone will want to, but you have to keep going anyway. You don't owe anyone an explanation for your growth. You don't need to convince small minds to see your big vision. Because if you stop every time someone doesn't get it, you'll never build anything worth remembering. You'll shrink yourself to stay in rooms you've outgrown. You'll dull your light to avoid making others squint. And slowly, piece by piece, you'll abandon your own soul for the comfort of being understood. But let me ask you something. What's the cost of that comfort? Because there is a cost. There's always a cost. If you need to be understood by everyone, you'll make safe choices. You'll live a life crafted by consensus instead of conviction. And when you look back, you won't see a life of meaning. You'll see a life of compromise. The truth is, the people who are meant to be in your life won't need every detail to believe in you. They won't need the blueprint before they support the build. They'll feel your authenticity. They'll see even if they don't fully understand it, they'll respect it. Everyone else? Let them misunderstand. Let them gossip. Let them assume. Their confusion is not your crisis. Because every time you hold back who you are to make yourself more understandable, you weaken the very thing that makes you powerful. Your individuality. Your edge. Your essence. You weren't designed to blend in. You weren't created to be accepted by the masses. You're here to disrupt, to awaken, to build something that wasn't here before. So stop watering yourself down. Stop trying to make sense to people who were never meant to walk your road. You're not weird. You're not too much. You're not wrong. You're just ahead of where they left you. And here's the beauty in that. When you stop needing to be understood, you finally become free. Free to follow your intuition, free to speak your truth, free to build a life that reflects your soul, not the opinions of strangers. That's the shift. That's when the noise fades. That's when you move from external validation to internal conviction. And that's when you start to lead, not because people agree with you, but because you've decided you don't need them to. So let them talk. Let them misunderstand. Let them judge. While they do that, you'll be building quietly, consistently, unapologetically. Because the goal was never to be understood by everyone. The goal is to be true to yourself. Loudly, boldly, relentlessly. They left. Good. Now you're free. See, you don't realize it right away. The silence feels heavy at first. The absence of familiar voices of the ones you thought would stay echoes louder than any crowd ever did. But then something begins to shift. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, you start to feel the weight. The noise quiets. The pressure to please disappears. And for the first time in a long time, you can actually hear your own voice. You don't need their approval anymore. You don't need to ask permission. You're free. Free to rise on your own terms. And that is the most powerful position a person can ever stand in. Unattached to expectation. Unchained from validation. Unfazed. Because here's what they never taught you. Sometimes it takes people leaving for you to truly arrive. Sometimes the absence of others creates the space you needed to meet yourself. You don't owe your evolution to anyone else. And more importantly, you don't need anyone else to believe in it for it to be real. You don't need a committee to approve your dream. You don't need someone clapping in the background to make your progress legitimate. When they left, they gave you something you never knew you needed. Room. Room to rebuild. Room to rise. And now you're standing in that space. It's just you and the open sky. No ceilings, no opinions, no restrictions. Just raw potential and unfiltered power. That's what freedom feels like. The world will try to convince you that you need a hand to hold to go higher. But some heights are only reached when your hands are empty. Some paths are too narrow to walk side by side with anyone else. And that's okay. Because what you're becoming isn't meant to be diluted, explained, or compromised. It's meant to be embodied, fully. You were waiting for permission. You were waiting for someone to tell you you're ready. But here's the truth. You've always been ready. They just made you doubt it. They made you feel like you needed to earn the right to grow, to lead, to shine. You don't. The door is open. Step through it. And don't look back. Not with regret, not with anger, not with bitterness, just with gratitude. For the lesson, for the clarity, for the unexpected gift of solitude. Let it remind you of your resilience. Let it remind you of your responsibility to rise, even if no one else shows up for the climb. You don't need to announce your comeback. You don't need to prove anything. The results will speak for themselves. Your strength will be undeniable. Your growth will be unmissable. And those who left, some of them will wish they stayed, some will try to come back, some will pretend they always believed. But that's none of your concern anymore. You're not rising for applause. You're not rising for revenge. You're rising because now you can, because nothing is holding you back, because the chains of needing to be seen, accepted, or supported have snapped, and in their place is something far more valuable: self-ownership. This is your life, no one else's. And now that you're no longer waiting to be chosen, you've chosen yourself. Rise, boldly, quietly, fiercely. No permission.